Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, Richard, Mr. Dreyfuss. I'm a huge fan of you since Jaws, as you can imagine. And it's really an honor for me to talk to you. I liked your film Astronaut a lot. I watched it on a screener. Because of the corona situation, it was not possible to watch it in a Berlin cinema, but I liked it a lot. And so my first question is, another big success of you was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And now, more than 40 years, you come back in some way with Astronaut. But it's not a science fiction movie. It's more a family portrait, or what would you say?
Yeah, it's not science fiction. It's not at all. It just uses that ambition and that kind of dream as the backdrop for the story. But fiction and space are alike in that they're enormous. And you can tell all kinds of stories within them. And the fact that this subject holds a pretty realistic domestic drama and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that's what humans do.
And can I ask, you had two big successes with Steven Spielberg films. You was his alter ego in some way. What film was closer to you, Jaws or Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Well, I let me put it in another way. The experiences were so different. The experience of making Jaws was, on top of many other things, was watching a boy become a man. And that was Steven.
Yeah.
Because when we arrived on that island, we didn't have a clue what enormous gallons of ignorance and stupidity we were going to see in our own behavior. And we had no idea how stupid we were. And Stephen was fired every day,
Yeah.
and he prevailed. And watching him do that was a very impressive thing. And there were many tributes to Stephen in the years that followed. And I remember writing this as a piece in one of the, tribute magazines that came with that evening. And I wrote about what it was like to see someone who there's a lot that Stephen and I had in common in those days. And we were both uncrowned princes. And then he got crowned.
Yeah.
And there was no escaping that. That happened. And then in my own way, in a much different way, I was crowned. And we were shooting Jaws when the apprenticeship of Judy Kravitz opened in New York to enormous ad buys in the New York Times. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, these girls started appearing all over the set. And we were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, so they had to get out there. And Stephen said once, he said, "What's going on here? Why is this happening?" And I said, "Stephen, if you had a 40-foot face, this would be happening to you too." So my level of experience was far shallower than his. he gathered together all of his inner strength and courage and creativity and prevailed and beat the expectations of the studio and beat his own expectations and beat my expectations. And he entered a life very rare. Will we ever meet another life of triumph that Steven has lived? And that triumph has not ended. It's gone on from that moment forward. And it's undeniable. And he did it, as far as I can tell, without giving up his humanity. And he also made an incredibly great movie. And I will be processing these things until the moment I die. You know, I don't have a comprehensive understanding of all of it yet. I do know that in the beginning of Jaws, if you were asked to appear on the set and pick out who is the authority figure, you'd never pick Steven.
Really?
No, you couldn't. You couldn't say that guy there in that he's wearing the same outfit that everyone else is wearing. He's the guy. You couldn't do that. The next film, you couldn't avoid it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I went to the last production meeting before the film company left L.A. to go to Wyoming to shoot Devil's Tower. Mm-hmm. And Steven was no longer, you know, the, I don't know, what would we call him? The Wally Cox of the unit. He was a general. Mm-hmm. Wow. He was a king, and he didn't have to have a lot of gestures, and people did not want to disappoint him.
Understand. And in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you work with another legendary director, but there he was an actor, Francois Truffaut. And I often admire him. I met his widow and also his daughter, Eva. And my all-time favorite actor, Oscar Werner, was in 2 films of him, Julie Jim and Fahrenheit 451. So how was the cooperation with Francois Truffaut? You as an actor, did you support him? Because he was just in some films, but his acting was nice for me. Yeah. What is your...
Well, I would say this. First of all, you're the first journalist who's ever brought this up.
Really?
And it's because you're European and you know that the world is bigger than Hollywood.
Yeah.
And when I was introduced to Francois, I got up from the table and I extended my hand and I said, "It's a great honor to meet you. And there's no such thing as auteur." And he laughed, and we spent the next 6 months arguing the point. And it was a life. I was like a pig in shit, you know. I had the greatest time in the world because I was a fan. I was an actor, and I knew I had talent. But I could experience that film as an insider, as an outsider, and I knew who Francois Truffaut was. I didn't have to be surprised, you know. And he said once that he had written films that he was acting in, and that he had directed films that he'd written, that he acted in. And he directed films that he didn't act in and written them. But what he had never done was only acted. And he never realized how boring it was.
Good answer. And did you? Yeah, sorry.
He wrote 2 scripts.
Yeah.
I think he wrote 3 scripts.
Mm-hmm.
I know he wrote 2. He might have been working on the 3rd before we were finished. And he was, by the way, there was a real mind behind it. What I mean is, if you see the film, the next time you look at the film, notice that all of the technicians and supporting players of the last 20 minutes of the movie, the landing site, all have this odd, incredibly childlike demeanor. And I was not aware of that at the time, although that's what got me the part. When I used to badmouth all these other actors to make sure that he wouldn't hire anyone else. And I said to him once, Steven, you need a child. He looked up and said, you got the part. And then when you watch the movie, you realize that every single technician, everyone in that crowd had this strange, childlike demeanor that allowed them a sense of wonder. And Truffaut has it. I have it. All the extras have it. Bobby Balaban has it. And it was clearly a decision made by Steven to talk about it. I never brought it up. I was unaware of it until it was over. And then it's one of the things that gives the film such a kind of mythic taste and touch. You know, the reason why Hollywood is where it is because before there were ever automobiles, the Indians had a name for that area, which was the place where you could see the air. Mm-hmm. Smog. There was smog before there were cars. And that gave film a slight mythic, magical quality that couldn't be found anywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. So that even though it was, yes, on the itinerary of that trip to get as far away from the Edison patents as possible, and it was the last stop on the trip, what they found there they didn't expect to find, and that was magic in the air. And you don't have that in Middle Europe. You know?
And did you ever met Oskar Werner, the actor? You know, Ship of Fools? And
yeah. Woo.
Did you ever met him?
Yeah.
I write a biography about him, and so I asked many people, also from Hollywood. He has many admirers. Jack Nicholson and Clint Eastwood, they are fans of.
Course.
So I just I want to ask.
Yeah. There's, you know, it's a hobby of mine to follow the alternate history of Hollywood, but where things might have gone. And it was only because of World War I that Hollywood became the capital of the movie business. Everything else was sanctioned and difficult to exhibit. But there was a book written in the 30s called Magic and the Myth of the Movies. And the author describes what it was like to walk in to a darkened, vaulted ceiling room. Huge, but so big and so dark that you really couldn't see the ceiling. And then you looked in one direction and saw in hyper color, in hyper reality, these figures, slightly bigger than real life, and they were, before sound, they were dancing and acting as one. They were creating an art form that unfortunately didn't have a lifespan long enough. But then with sound, you came into the greatest writing, the greatest dialogue, because there was such censorship that the writers had to supply the sex and the flirtation and the tease and the violence and all of that. They were, Ben Heck, the writer, sent a telegram to his partner, Charles MacArthur, who is married to Helen Hayes. Mm-hmm. And the telegram said something like, get out here. There's millions to be made, and they're all idiots. And for 30 years, the writers ruled that roost. And there hasn't been a brilliant screenplay written in modern-day Hollywood since, I think, Clint Eastwood's The Unforgiven.
Yes.
That's a great screenplay.
Absolutely.
And they don't. The people who run the business now, they don't even have a clue what a good screenplay is. No.
Yes, most of them, I agree. And now Hollywood also changed again because of this corona situation with the shooting of the film. Everything is delayed. The film Mulan come not to our cinemas, just as a streaming to watch. So how do you deal with the corona situation as an actor and as the man who you are, Richard Dreyfuss?
Well, a month and a half ago, I did a show which was called Stories from the Coronavirus. And I was having a love affair with Greta Scotke. And she was in London. Mm-hmm. And we never met in real life. We were talking to one another through our computers. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty good. Pretty good. And so there's going to be something, but what that something is, I really don't know. It's going to be a game changer. That's easy. And I had suspected, not about the coronavirus, but I thought that film was going to morph into exhibiting the way opera exhibits. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of money, few performances, but spectacle that only large screen IMAX can give you. And when I saw Jurassic Park, I called Steven and I said, so I think I'm going to go to, what's her name? Who's the greatest actress in America? What's her name?
Meryl Streep.
Meryl.
Yeah.
I was going to go to Meryl, and I was going to say, do me a favor and read 10 minutes of the phone book into this microphone. Because I knew, long after Meryl's dead, that someone was going to say, let's do Meryl Streep's Hamlet. And they will have the technology to do that.
Yeah. And
so I said, I'm going to have their voices. I'll do it. And that's my way in. And it didn't take an idiot to persuade me that they themselves will have taken care of that part of the problem. I'm not going to wind up, eccentric billionaire Richard Dreyfuss owns Meryl Streep's voice. No. But it's going to be something. It's going to be completely different. They have not yet put the money into anything, not one production. And if they did, they have every reason to think that no one's going to show up to work.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
This is the meteor that killed the dinosaurs.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting what you say. I'm thinking about it. And come back to Astronaut. Can we say the film has a little autobiographical touch for you because the interaction with the young boy, Richie, is his real name, I think, no? It's really good and really touching. And I read that you fought in your personal life successful against the bipolar disorder. And in this film, the family also supports you a lot. First just a little boy, later also his father, and of course your daughter. So is there some special autobiographical moment in the film also for you, or it was another job? But I don't think you are an actor who just do it like a job. I think there's always something of you inside the film. So this is my thinking. But please correct.
I think that if I had not played Close Encounters, the perception of this film would be completely different. I'm the actor. I'm the guy who left this planet and left his wife and children behind him. And now he's telling another side of that story. And I think there's a million stories like that can be told. And I've already written the sequel.
Yeah?
Yeah, and people would ask Steven all the time, does he have a sequel for Close Encounters? And he would always say, I've already shot it. It's called E.T.
Okay.
All right? Well, mine is the trailer for the sequel. And in it, you see the lights come up, and I'm sitting there, and I say, hi, I'm the guy who played Roy Neary in that movie 20 years ago, and I want you to know that I'm back, and I know how to cure cancer, and I know how to impart inner harmony, and I can make the world a perfect and wonderful place. And I've decided that I'm not going to say anything at all until I find myself a really tough, strong entertainment lawyer, because I know that they're going to try to fuck me. And that's the sequel.
Mr. Dreyfuss, you don't know, I was Germany's youngest publisher. I started my own film and music magazine, cultural magazine Spirit, A Smile in the Storm, with 16. It's still existing. First print copy, now online. And I did really many interviews with Elia Kazan, Gregory Peck. I was always the youngest. Now I'm not the youngest anymore, but also not the oldest. And I have a poll in my Spirit magazine where I asked actors, directors, and other human beings about their all-time favorite films. Could you name me now, because you're also interested in the history of cinema, I recognize, 3 of your all-time favorite films, and give a small reason, please. Would be nice.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. When the Germans took over Paris, they told the theater owners that they would have another week to play anything they wanted, then the German industry would take over. Every theater in Paris played Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And that says a lot about a culture which is cohesive and shares gestures that are truly large and important. So that's one. Could I name you other films? Of course. If some name does not pop into my head, it's only because there's too many names jostling around. And I loved acting, and I loved having that responsibility and that we were the Punch and Judy show. Actors are the ones that Hamlet describes best. Mm-hmm. And I worshipped it. I really did. And when I was 16, 17 years old, I used to sit in cafes in LA and try to get my friends to find the nobility in acting. Let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. Because I felt it. And I wanted that to share. I wanted to share it. And I'd had an experience watching Sir John Gielgud perform The Ages of a Man. And let me tell you, to know without a shadow of a doubt that I was undergoing at that moment my first true spiritual revelation when he came out and began to talk and do this poetry. Half of me was sitting up in the balcony with his actor friends, and the other half was experiencing awe for the first time. And I watched this man, this little man, with a voice that was as purely musical as a great Stradivarius violin. And he was submitting to the great poetry and prose of Shakespeare. And he ennobled my life. And I never once doubted it was there after that. And many years later, I persuaded the Disney company to do a show for kids about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. And it was aimed at 11-year-old children. Yeah. I thought, if you can make people laugh as they learn, that's great teaching. And I needed someone who could speak against the Constitution at the time of its writing. And I wrote this speech. And at a certain point, I just took a deep breath and said, oh, fuck it. And I called for John Gielgud, who consented. And I flew to London, and I directed him. Wow. I'm going to cry. I'll tell you right now. I showed up at the studio probably about 7:30 in the morning, and everything was done, finished, done, production, lighting, and he was already in costume, and I said, well, let's just turn on the camera and see what happens. And he did it perfectly. So we did it again perfectly, and then we changed position and did it again and again, and we were finished by 9:30. And you can't be finished that soon. So I sat down next to him, and I said, you think maybe you could try a completely different approach to, and I made some bullshit up. I just couldn't let him go at that moment in the morning, you know. So I threw out some ideas, and he he chuckled, and he put his hand on my knee, and he said, "Oh, how amusing, dear boy." And then he did it my way perfectly.
Super.
And that's what you see in my show. You see a man speaking from the House of Lords, deriding the power, the sovereign power being handed to the lower classes. Mm-hmm. And I stole a line from Alexander Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And it was during the Constitutional Convention that George Mason of Virginia said, "Mr. Hamilton, sir, what about the people?" And Hamilton said, "The people, sir, is a great beast." And that was Gielgud's last line.
Cool.
Yeah. And so that was great moment.
He was really a great actor. I remember the film The Shoes of the Fisherman, and there we have the three best Hamlets of the last century: Oscar Werner, Laurence Olivier, and John Gielgud in one film. Yeah. I love this film, and also this film, the topic. Yeah, it's a science fiction film in the Vatican. Yeah, never done again. A film like this. This is really unique film. I really love this film, and
Gielgud did it in two different ways. Mm-hmm. He did it in the 30s with this very effete thing, and then when Olivier did it, right after or right before the war, I can't remember now, he did it again in 47 or 48.
Yes.
And it was a very, very different production. And it's something so admirable about the English and the Germans that they can collect one art form around another art form and mix and match. And, you want to see Oscar Werner's Hamlet. You want to see that happen. Olivier is the last white actor to play Othello. Mm-hmm. And that is a disgrace. Mm-hmm. Someone's going to tell me that I can't play Othello? Fuck you.
Yeah, this is a modern political correctness life we have here.
Paranoid extreme.
Yeah.
It's we have reduced ourselves. We have diminished ourselves to such smaller people, such smaller ambitions, and such smaller expectations. And there's really very little to compliment mankind right now and for the past 40 years. We had a great victory over Adolf Hitler. And when I went to rehab, because I was a drug addict, there was one experiment that they did, and it was to prove that people did not know how to take a compliment. Mm-hmm. And 10 people are surrounding a guy, and each one of those people is obligated to say to him something really nice and good that he did. And before 5 people get finished, he's this is what he's doing. He's going, and he's crying, and he's warding it off. And these are the same people, if you said, "Motherfucker, you asshole, you left your kids in the supermarket for 6 hours," we water off a duck's back. But that same guy can't take a compliment. He can't be honored. And that's human. That's where we brought ourselves right now.
Certainly. Oh, yeah. Now we come to the end. Just I would like to say, one day I hope to meet you in person when it's possible. It was really a wonderful conversation with you, and as you can imagine, I had more questions, but now I leave you and wish the best for you, good health, and be.
So let me ask you: if I came to Germany and did a production in English, would that be acceptable?
Of course, we had sometimes in Berlin this kind of actors from America or also England, and they did some productions. Of course, and it would be possible. I think yes. You. All the best, Mr. Dreyfuss. It was
Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank.